Hi, everyone. Nick Maida, CEO of Gainsight. Welcome back to the Human First CEO series on LinkedIn Live. I'm absolutely thrilled and totally honored to be joined by Todd McKinnon, CEO of Okta, to talk a little about how he runs Okta as a Human First CEO. Welcome, Todd.
Thanks, Nick. I'm excited to be here.
Really, really psyched. I actually, as I'm sure many people, I follow you on Twitter. I've always been struck by how transparent you've been in your leadership style. And talking about the big things and the little things. So I think all of us are really excited to get to know you a little bit better. But let's get to know you better on the personal side first. So I always like to know the kind of human side of these CEOs. All of us are human beings. And one of the human conditions right now is not being able to do everything we normally were able to do. So what's on your bucket list when the Moderna, Pfizer, whatever vaccine is out and we can do everything we want? What are you waiting to do?
Yeah, by the way, how amazing is that? Like,
amazing.
Great vaccine progress in like 10 months.
Unbelievable.
I think it's going out to a nice dinner.
Nice dinner. There you go.
At a restaurant, yeah, with my wife and kids, and fully crowded restaurant with that buzz, that jingle of a nice indoor restaurant. That's what I'm looking forward to.
I do love that buzz. I'm with you. I thought you were going to say something like do some kind of massive CrossFit tournament or something, because Todd is also an extreme athlete as well and CrossFit champion. So maybe we'll learn more about that.
I do miss out. I do miss working out with my friends. We could go on all day about stuff we miss, Nick.
I can imagine. And then the only other icebreaker I was going to ask you, because it was on your Twitter thread recently, was you created an amazing reading list by asking people what their favorite books were. What are you reading right now?
So I just finished a book about the pandemic, the 1918 pandemic.
Oh, interesting.
It was called The Great Influenza, and it was good. It was pretty good. It turned out to be about much more than the pandemic. It was kind of about medical research and medical science about that time. And then the second thing I'm about halfway through a biography of Abraham Lincoln. So someone joked,
awesome.
Boy, you're really into the boring stuff.
Well, reading about the pandemic may not be a pick-me-up, but that sounds very informative.
It's bad, yeah.
Yeah, it sounded bad. I'm reading, actually, one of the other ones in your list was I'm reading Range right now. I don't know if you've read Range yet.
I've heard a million great things about that. And
yeah,
it's on my Twitter. Read it. Go and check it out.
Yeah, you can check it out. He's got a great list of book recommendations. So in this series, what I like to do is talk about how companies are kind of expanding the definition of what success is. Like, we all know that companies to be successful have to, deliver shareholder results, and Okta has done an amazing job of that. But we think that, in the future, CEOs are embracing this idea that you have to drive success for all stakeholders. And, we didn't come up with this concept. Actually, your former employer, Salesforce, has been a total pioneer in this idea of stakeholder capitalism. But I think Okta's also done a great job of this. So I'm going to talk about the community first. We'll talk about how does Okta sit in the broader community around you. Then we'll talk about your team. How do you make sure your team's winning? Your customers, because obviously you love customer successes if you follow me. And then we'll talk about how that all adds up for shareholders. So let's talk about community. Like, how did you think about Okta's role in the community, maybe pre-2020, and maybe how that's evolved with 2020?
It starts from a kind of a philosophical basis, which is from the early days, it was very clear to all of us that a lot of our good fortune and our success was because of our communities, whether that was, our families or the education we were blessed with, the countries we came from, the environments, the government. So we had this philosophy that, a lot of our success was because of our communities and our conditions. And I think what has always been really important to us is that we not only have a successful business, but we also build a business that can give back to that community. And so very early on, we started Okta for Good, and we took the 1% pledge, and we dedicated 1% of our equity, pre-IPO equity, to Okta for Good Foundation. And then, like a lot of companies, it's pretty exciting. A lot of companies are doing this now, and we have a well-funded philanthropic arm of Okta that can really help us implement this philosophy, which is, centering the culture of employees around this connectedness to the community, giving back to the community, volunteer time, and then really focusing some of the more mature programs on things like making sure that nonprofit organizations have as great of a tech stack as all the for-profit companies with Okta and other technologies. So it's pretty satisfying. It feels like it's good karma, right? It's like from what we came from, we give back to. And I think it's infused culturally in the company, and it's good for all the stakeholders, as you said.
I love that. That's, if folks don't know, the Pledge 1% organization, which is kind of who kind of espouses that concept, is amazing. And if your company's thinking about that, definitely check out Pledge 1%. We've been fortunate to be part of that program as well. And in that process, you created amazing amount of value for communities. How did you think about like where to focus those dollars? Then is it an employee-led thing? Do you have some top-down initiatives? How does that work?
Exactly, both. I mean, so I think that first of all is that there's no better broad indicator of what's important to the communities we operate in than the employees. So they can, whether it's, if they want to, we have tons of matching programs in terms of donations to nonprofits they want to support. We have obviously focused effort on volunteering for community or for organizations they think are important to support. Which, again, the connectedness of the employees to the community and their ability to lead us in the right direction there is really important. In terms of the more of the centralized programs, we're focusing on, technological enablement, right? So making sure that as every organization, not just for-profit, private and public companies, are trying to do better with technology and use technology to further their missions, nonprofits have the same opportunity. And frankly, even bigger challenge, because a lot of times nonprofits don't have the means in terms of IT and technology to bring those resources to bear that they need. So we're really focused on trying to help them be better users of technology and get more leverage out of technology through a lot of the work for Okta for Good. That's
awesome. And if I kind of hearing that correctly, you've kind of found a way that your top-down initiatives fit with the mission of the company as well, because obviously Okta as a business is enabling access to technology to your customers, and the mission of your kind of nonprofit is quite aligned to that.
Yeah, there's definitely that's definitely true. There's a lot of synergy there, and I think that it's and one of the good things about a business like Identity is what's actually a blessing and a challenge sometimes is that it's so core to everything we do that it's applicable to every industry, every company, nonprofit sector, no exception.
Yeah.
And the downside of that is sometimes it's harder to know where to focus, right? So we try to balance those off by, trying to spread ourselves as wide as possible for the impact, but not too wide.
Well, now this year with 2020, I think companies had an even bigger wake-up call about their role in the community. How did the conversation evolve or change in 2020 at Okta about what you want to do inside the community?
Well, I felt one of the things that, the big changes in 2020 are COVID-19 and the pandemic, and then the racial injustice things and Black Lives Matter really coming to the forefront. And I think that I'm really, really glad that for a couple things, thinking about how the company has been able to react. One is that I feel like the leadership team we've done a good job building a close connection with the employees, and talk about a human first CEO. If you can, or a human first company or a CEO, if you have a close connection, that's really about that human connection. And what that leads to is that as things inevitably get complicated or stressful or things have to change, if you have that connection with your employees, you have a much better capability, I think, to navigate that change. So it's not something that you can kind of turn on at a dime. You have to build it up over time, and then it comes in helpful when you have times that, like we've had this year, where there's so much tumult and stress people are going through. So I think we've really relied on that as well. And I think the second thing is that because of this cultural philosophy and this being connected to the community, I think it's helped us better understand the way some of these things are impacting people. So, we've always encouraged people to be in touch with their community and interact with their community, and feel like they have a responsibility for it. So when you see something like the racial injustice bubble up and get so much on people's minds, I think we were better prepared to have that conversation and be front-footed about giving back and what we're going to do to be involved in that, and being very bold about our position on that and so forth, which I think if you weren't as kind of connected to the communities, you wouldn't be in as strong a position to navigate that.
Yeah, there's a theme under both of those, which is just all the preparation that you do by doing this every day versus just doing it when it becomes popular as sort of a national conversation.
And I think that's right. So a concrete example in that I think might be more helpful if I'm more concrete about some of these things. We've done an all hands meeting every week for forever, right? Since we had 25 people. And I think more and more companies are doing this. But I think a lot of times at certain scale, it gets hard or people feel like they're not efficient, so they give it up. But I'm really glad we didn't, because it enabled us to get in front of the company every week and deliver kind of human first information about what was happening, about the way we were being agile and trying to change and be flexible with the conditions. And you can't turn that on a dime, because first of all, if the CEO never comes on and talks to you, what are you going to think when they finally do? You're like, we're really in trouble. This must be really bad. He's talking to us now. But when you do it all the time, it's more natural. It's like, here, big things are going on. Here's what we're thinking about. Here's what we're trying to shift. Here's the priorities and so forth.
I love that. That's such a good example. You're totally right. That's why it's about what you do before the crisis happens. So
you can't cram for the test. You got to
do the work. So let's talk about your team. Obviously Okta is an amazing business, and it's, I love how you share the stories from the early days, like the slide decks for your investor presentations and all, how far you've come along the way. One of the things that I'd be really interested in is what was your definition of the company's kind of values and culture back when you were 25 employees, and has that evolved or changed as you've gotten to be a kind of public company?
The core, it's evolved and changed a little bit, but I think the core elements have been there. And the first thing was customer success and being very customer centric.
Yay.
Yeah, exactly. Conveniently. But I think that, one of the whole Okta was really a bet on the cloud and bet on SaaS, right? And if more and more companies needed to access technology outside the firewall and work from anywhere and connect with their customers, identity would be a big deal. But it was really a bet that the shifting landscape of technology toward cloud and SaaS would facilitate that. And being customer centric in this world that you knew it was going to be subscription, and you knew it was going to be recurring revenue that you have to renew, and you knew that upsells were going to be so important, and you knew that customers could turn you off if you didn't make them successful. It's not surprising that the core value was customer success, right? So it's a little bit of a creature of what we thought would make us the most success. And that's been a foundational thing, and almost to a fault at points, right? Like, there have been points where we've been so customer centric that it's enabled us to maybe make some strategic errors, right?
Interesting.
We were so much listening to what the customers wanted. It slowed us down from making a product pivot or an innovation or direction that was better for the customers long term. But I think we've struck a good balance over the years of keeping that core of being super customer centric and guided by customer feedback, but at the same time interjecting our own point of view and our own philosophy about where things would go, because customers want that too, right? They want you to, as a vendor in these emerging spaces, to lead them where you think they should go as well.
I love that. That's great. And so customer success was one of the values, which I fully endorse. What were the other values that you came up with in the early days?
The other one that was really important to us and still is to this. In fact, when I interview every senior person that joins the company, I interview, and I always ask them about, what's your take on the culture? What do you think of the people? And one of the things that always comes back is one of the second values that I think is really important. They always tell me that, everyone's super transparent and super open about what's going on. And I think that's been a core key to our success too. And it's not just because transparency is good for transparency's sake. It's more deeper than that. And basically it's like, we want everyone to think like, as to the degree possible, it's their company and it's up to them to build it and be an owner of it. And if you're very transparent with people, it puts them in a position and a mindset that they are that builder and that owner. Because, if I'm sharing with you all this information about the ups and downs and the highs and lows, you're going to feel like, wow, this is like, I know what's going on. I feel like I'm bought into this. I really want to do whatever I can as a builder and owner to make it successful. So that's been a very virtuous cycle in terms of more transparency, more alignment, more people feeling like they own it. They can affect the future, which leads to more transparency and more innovation and good morale and other things.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm a big fan of transparency. I think the way you articulate it's great, and I see you practice it just in the way you communicate. Do you since we talk about alignment, one of the things that I think a lot about is what does success mean for each teammate in the company? And I can imagine that changes as the company grows. As you're now a public company of a lot of people. Each one of them has their own definition of success based on where they're in their career. How do you think about like what's in it for the team at Okta?
It's like pretty overly simplistic I think it's overly simplistic to think that it's one homogenous thing with one goal. So I think that what we try to do is encourage people to, kind of have their own plans or their own agenda or their own priorities and so forth, but communicate them, right? We have a whole internal kind of process and structure. It's simplistic and it's not too heavyweight, but it's all about communicating the objectives and the vision and the alignment of what we're trying to do. And I think it's a good vehicle for getting that individual initiative out there, but still aligning it with what the high level goals are. That's never perfectly aligned, right? I mean, you're never going to get something so cut and dry that it's perfectly codified in this series of lists and so forth, but it's pretty good, simple mechanism to try to get the priorities that people are shooting for out there, and then try to get them aligned around the core priorities of the company.
Is that if I'm track it, is that the V2 MOM process that you?
Salesforce has the V2 MOM process, and ours is similar. It's a little bit different, a little bit. We took some of the good things and took some of the good things from like OKRs and other things. And came up. The big thing for me on this stuff is that it's simple, right? Mm-hmm. The tendency is always to over-engineer these things, and you want to especially if someone like me that comes from an engineering background, it's like you want to build a perfect system that codifies every nuance and
cascades everything down. Right.
Don't do that, because at best you're gonna not screw it up too much. At worst, you're gonna really make it screwed up. So just keep it simple. It's not perfect, but it gets the ideas out there and the priorities aligned, and then trust the people to figure out the details.
That's awesome. That's such a big part of it. Yeah, just getting people aligned in terms of what their definition of their goals are. One of the other things we talk about with our teams being successful is just their work environment. I kind of feel like I'm asking one of the experts on this, because Okta is very much an enabling technology for work from anywhere. You've put out some public announcements about this in terms of flexibility for your teammates. How are you thinking about the future of what work looks like at Okta, where people work from, and how many people want to be in the office versus not?
We're trying to do something hard. We're trying to thread the needle, which is we're trying to take the best of fully remote and combine it with the best of having an office. And we call it dynamic work. Other people call it, hybrid or some combination. And that's where we're going. It was actually, it's interesting. Before the pandemic, we had a internal initiative to do this called dynamic work. And it was basically to try to not so office centric, and because we were pretty office centric before this, and it was mostly so we could hire great people anywhere in the world, so that we wouldn't kind of balloon our real estate costs up. And the reality was, people, not surprisingly, were kind of defaulting the old way and being office centric, and we were having a hard time getting a lot of traction with it. But one thing the pandemic has done is it really made it clear to everyone, obviously, well, it seems obvious now, but we can be effective remote. So we do have a shot now, I think, to fully combine all the benefits of remote with all the really concrete benefits of being in an office in person. Some people like it. There's, sometimes the collaboration and communication is better. So we're trying to bring all those things together, and I'm pretty excited about it in the next 5 to 10 years.
That's awesome. I do think there's a lot of innovation that needs to happen. And one of the things I've learned, and I'm sure you have the same thing, is, as you said, every employee is different. And some people love being at home, and some people like being in the office, and some people want something in between. I was on a roundtable do weekly roundtables with a kind of random group of people at Gainsight. And today everyone said all the people in this roundtable were like, I miss the office so much, and so
Yeah.
other people are like, oh, I love not going to the office. And yeah, it's too easy to stereotype everyone as having one goal, right?
And I totally agree. And Nick, I think that the situation, so right now Okta is fully remote, but this is probably easier than the dynamic will be, I think, because
I agree.
When you get half the people in an office and half online, it's harder than just when everyone's flat online. So I think that we don't underestimate the work to be done to make it awesome.
One of the challenges I think in that is that kind of conference room problem where some people are in the conference room and then other people are like trying to keep tabs of what's happening. We've all probably been in that situation. Have you figured out a solution to that, or what are you thinking?
We haven't.
I
think so. There's some technical stuff. I think there'll be some, just processes and kind of etiquette type things.
Yep.
And we'll see, right? I think my prediction is that there'll be a lot more fully Zoom. Once we're back to dynamic, I think there'll be a lot more fully online meetings than we think, even if people are sitting in the office.
That's what I'm thinking too. Yeah, I think that because I do feel like we have such a level playing field right now, and I don't want to lose that. And actually we've been distributed for a while. So we even would do things like when we did the all hands, even if we're in the office, we do them from our computers and stuff like that, we didn't come up with that idea, but I think it really does level the playing field a lot.
Yeah. So. Tons of innovation in products and some of the collaboration tools will, I'm sure will evolve to help us be more effective, and it's exciting.
That's right. And Okta will be behind it all, helping us keep our identity and our
another self-serving plug. Yes, we're going to solve it all.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk about the third chapter, my favorite one, customer success. And just from some context, when people ask me what companies should I learn from to talk about customer success and who does it really well, and obviously naturally Salesforce comes up, and they've been a real pioneer, and a few other companies, but Okta is always on my list. From Krista, your first chief customer officer, to Eric now, and you have an amazing approach to it, and I'm sure there's a lot more you want to do. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how customer success fit into your strategy from the early days, and then we can shift to kind of where you're going from here.
Well, I think, I mentioned this earlier, but very early on, it was a pillar, right? And I think when it's just a pillar of the culture and you spend the first year of the company basically working closely with customers and prospects to hone your product idea, and then you spend the second year working closely with them just to get a few of them live. When you get to the point where you start to have to invest in teams or systems to fill out that department, it makes it much easier. And then you bring on great leaders like Krista that you mentioned and Eric. It kind of takes on a momentum of its own in the company. But one of the very important things about it that we've learned is that there's so much of it you can do manually. You can have the value, you have the value of it, you can do the investment, but we're getting close to 10,000 customers, and there's only so much of it you can do manually. And in the early days of Okta, we did a lot of stuff manually. And I think that investing in tools, Gainsight is obviously very important for us in terms of like using the tool. In addition to like manual processes is really, really important, because it's, at some point, no matter how hard you work, there's only 24 hours in the day. You can only hire so many people, and you have to go from that, beyond that just basic philosophical value of it, to investing in the systems and the processes and the automation to make it scale to everyone.
That's great. Yeah, that scale point is such a good one, and your team does do a great job on the kind of what we call tech touch, kind of like high touch with technology and all that. One of the other ways to scale is by not just making it one department's problem. As you said, it was kind of part of the company value, so it's really everyone's problem. And what we're increasingly seeing is, product and customer success working more together, sales and customer success. I'm guessing you all do this a ton. What's that collaboration look like across the management team? Well,
there's another thing that hearing you speak about it made pop into my mind was that it's, especially in our industry, is identity management, selling technologies and tools to IT. The competitive differentiation of great customer success is very, very stark. Meaning, it's great a lot of times it's a relative difference to competitors. And some of the people that the customers we've had, especially early customers, they were completely shocked that someone that was selling identity management and IT technology was so customer centric, which was a huge advantage for us. And then also just beyond just a culture of that's important, but in our industry, it's so complex and it's so intricate how it all works together and how the security implications of it are, and how a lot of times it's not clear what's causing the problem or whose responsibility is. So we had this, beyond just that it was important, we had this culture of it's our problem. It's like if you go to work at Four Seasons, I'm sure you know this, they train you to never say, that's not my problem. Someone else will take care of that. They train you to say, even if it is someone else's problem, they train you to say, I will figure that out for you. And then you go out and figure out who can help, right? So just having that mindset and saying it's our problem, it's like this, it becomes part of your brand. This is, Okta's not going to blame someone else. Okta has my back. Okta is going to take this hairy area and help me figure it out, which is, in terms of competitive differentiation, it's pretty valuable.
That's huge. And I think that, tell me if I'm overstating it, but as you've launched new products, I think that trust you earned with your customers gave you permission then for them to say, okay, yeah, tell me about the new product, right? Probably helped with your expansion as well. For sure.
Yeah. It's definitely helps in that vein, but also people move around, right? And as people go to new companies and they bring that memory of that Okta had their back, and Okta never, and we're not perfect, right? Like, I'm sure we haven't done this consistently and completely, but by and large, I'm pretty proud that, if someone asks, what's it like to work with Okta? One of the things that'll come up is like, they know what they're doing. And if they don't, they'll be honest with you, and they'll kind of take the problem and try to solve it and be your partner and trying to fix, help your technology get implemented.
That's awesome. I love that. And I have seen that, by the way. I've talked to so many Okta customer CIOs who say exactly that. So tying this all together, then obviously we do have kind of our shareholders, and we've got, businesses to run, and that's super important. There is a bit of a debate online about, hey, maybe companies should just focus on the bottom line. Some people have written stuff about that. It should, stay out of all the other stuff, the community, the social stuff, all that. Businesses should just focus on that. There's obviously other companies like Okta and others that think differently. How do you navigate that? And what do you say to the folks that say, just focus on the bottom line?
I think that there's a difference. So I think it's really important that, and this gets back to that connection with employees, that the connection with, the market and customers. You can't just be a robot, right? You can't be in this box and you don't have any personal opinions or feelings. They want to know who you are, and part of that is being your whole self. And I expect the same thing from employees. I want them to bring their whole self to work. But they also there's also a lot of issues in the world that reasonable people can disagree on, and there's valid different points of view. So they also don't want a leader or a CEO that's going to preach, right? Stand up every day and start talking about stuff that as if that, there's no one can disagree on it. And it's clear, cut and dry. So for me, and I think it's worked reasonably well, is I try to differentiate the issues that are, they may be political, but they're very relevant to Okta. Like, for example, immigration, right? Immigration policy. I think that is super relevant to Okta, and it is political, pro-immigration, anti-immigration, of course. But I'm really, it's easy for me to be vocal and taking a stand on our immigration policy as a country because it's super relevant to Okta, right?
Totally.
Another one is the racial injustice. That is super relevant to Okta. We don't tolerate any of that. We're proud to stand up for Black Lives Matter and the other organizations that espouse racial equality and so forth. But there's a bunch of other issues that, if people ask me in private or the employees ask me, I'll tell them how I think, but I'm not going to get out there and bang the drum for something where it maybe not that relevant to Okta and reasonable people could disagree. So that's kind of how I draw the line. And it's, like I said, it's for me, it's been a good balance between having that human perspective, but also not being too preachy.
Yeah, I think that's you. I saw you wrote a kind of article on this just, I think, a week ago, and I thought that was very well said, because I do think you can alienate people and even your employees if you feel like there's only one valid opinion on things. But at the same time, you could abdicate all your company values and morals if you don't take a stand on anything. So
yeah, and I think it's just, I agree. And I think it's also just as you're missing an opportunity if you are so scared of talking about anything, your people in your ecosystem don't know you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I've gotten to know you better just based on what you've shared online. So maybe I'll just close with one final question. You know, a CEO or leader that's watching this and intrigued about human first and this whatever terminology you use, but this concept of leadership, what's one piece of advice you'd give them to sort of potentially take a step in that direction?
I think it's important to, it's hard to find your voice, right? You have to find your voice. And I would say don't resist the temptation that you think you have to know all the answers. I see this particularly, not just in CEOs, but particularly in people that are getting leadership jobs for the first time, whether it's their first management job or their first, maybe managing managers and so forth. The tendency is to, now they're the boss, they have to have all the answers, right? And that can lead to bad results because, first of all, no one has all the answers, and you don't get ahead by knowing all the answers. You get ahead by building an organization that can come up with the right answers. And a lot of times knowing all the answers is going to not want anyone that's good to work for you or make anyone, which is going to be counterproductive besides a million other reasons. So I would say, you don't have to have all the answers. Be confident in yourself. You got that job for a reason, and you have a mindset that you can bring the best out of the team and get to the right answers as a whole, and that's going to lead to your success.
That's awesome. Well, Todd, thank you so much to your whole team for being a role model in customer success, for securing our identities, and also for kind of practicing human first. Really great to see you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it's fun to be here, Nick. Thank you very much.
And thanks to all of you for watching. See you again soon.